That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, here we are going to be talking about my favorite thing on the planet, and that is some Dynasty fantasy football. And now, what I want to be doing before I just go through and talk about some of these sell high candidates is I want to talk a little bit more about the strategy at this time of the season, because I know a lot of people haven't necessarily been playing in a high volume of Dynasty leagues for that long now. I know a lot of people are only in their first or second season in Dynasty and really don't know how the marketplace changes throughout the entire season. So I want to dive in depth on what we're currently experiencing and what you can go and take advantage of in your own Dynasty leagues. But of course, before we do that, we have to go through and give a massive thank you for everybody supporting this channel. Subscribe to the channel. I apologize that we're not getting out daily videos here, but I promise you we'll be getting out daily videos once we get to the off season, because this is where we want to put in that work. This is where we want to do the research, preparing all off season, building those Dynasty teams for the main event in the regular season. And I mean, not that much is going to be changing in Dynasty as it is in redraft, because we know Dynasty, you still should have that long-term approach. But of course, go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel only if you play in Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues or a Keeper League. If you're just playing in 2021 leagues, I mean, this is not for you, to be completely honest. And also leave a comment with any trade questions you may have, or just with any overall players you think we should be selling. And yeah, let's go into it. And let's start it off with our first player. Actually, I'm sorry, before we get to the players, let's talk about what we are trying to accomplish when we are selling players right now. And what we have to understand is, when we're going into week 3, this is the peak of the craziness. I mean, y'all know that I was saying that you really didn't want to be selling your picks. You wanted to be holding on to your picks everywhere that you could, going up until we get to the season. And then during the season, if you're a contending team, then you can go and sell those picks and you can really find exactly what you want. Well, now is the absolute worst time to do that. I am telling you right now, going into week 3, this is the time where everybody thinks that they're a contender. Now, of course, you have 1 or 2 teams in every single league that came out and they go, okay, well, we're punting the season before it even starts. We're just loading up on future assets, trading away any productive players. But outside of that, anybody who even has a bad team right now, all they've been thinking about is, who am I starting this week? How am I building this team? Who do I need at running back too? And they have kind of taken away that long-term approach to our overall team constructions. And how we can take advantage of that is we can identify players that are just one-year fill-ins, that are guys that you're never going to hear the name of again a year from now. And we can go out there and try to sell them while they still have some value, and we can try to get that stable asset going forward. So understand that you do not want to be selling your picks right now. The actual best thing to buy at the moment is going to be a round 2 Dynasty rookie picks in those super flex formats, because everybody still kind of holds a decent amount of value for their round 1 pick. But I'm telling you right now, those round 2 picks, once we get to the offseason, especially in the super flex format, I mean, they are going to have a considerable amount of value, just knowing that they're going to be very flexible. You can add them to any deal, and you can really use them to get almost any player that you want if you structure it in the way that makes sense. But as of now, they're just throwaways. I mean, they're just things that people are not really considering whatsoever. But let's go through and let's bring up some of these running backs. So we're looking to trade away players that right now, I mean, have really only 2021 value and will have nothing beyond this year. And it's fine only having 2021 value if you're going to bring in elite level production. I mean, if you are someone like Dalvin Cook, or you're someone like Derrick Henry, where of course they will have value in 2022, but it's going to be significantly lower than what they do currently, I'm fine if you're a contending team holding them onto your roster, understanding that their production is going to be so far ahead of baseline that they will make a difference and they will help you win your league. Now, other players like our first guy here, Tyson Williams, is the exact opposite of that. Where you're looking at Tyson Williams, you're going, okay, well, this is a running back that was an undrafted player in that 2020 class out of BYU. Of course, he had a little bit of a different backstory than that. And yes, he's a player that a lot of people are talking about right now. I mean, y'all know I live stream every single night on our main fantasy football channel, answering start-sit questions. And I mean, I'm happy whenever we get a Dynasty question out there in those live streams, because of course that's my favorite way to play the game. And I've had some questions about Tyson Williams and just they're kind of blowing me away. Like, would you rather have Tyson Williams or DJ Chark? And I'm sitting here going, if you go back and you look at a trade where you possibly trade DJ Chark for Tyson Williams, and you look back at that this next offseason, you are going to be beating yourself up to no end, because I promise you, right now you're looking at Tyson Williams, and this is a running back that we are only ever going to hear about for 2021. And going right back to what we were saying at the beginning of the video, I'm fine with players like that, but they have to be making an actual difference in your starting lineup. More times than not, if you're a real contending team, Tyson Williams makes no difference for you whatsoever. Because think about it. If you're a contending roster in a dynasty format, you probably have very solid running backs. You most likely have a Derrick Henry and a Joe Mixon. So what value are you actually getting from having Tyson Williams on that roster? You're going to be benching him more times than not. If you're a true contender, you should never need to start him anyway. The only value that he has right now are to the teams that are just pretenders, or to the teams that think that they're actually having a shot to win in 2021, whereas they really have no shot because they're relying on Tyson Williams. This is an asset that literally only has 2021 value, and that should mean that he's only valuable to contending teams. But at the end of the day, he shouldn't be valuable to contending teams, because if you need him, he is someone that makes it where he's a good gauge of knowing if you're a contender or not. So Tyson Williams, it doesn't matter if you're a rebuilding team, knowing that he'll have no value in 2022. It doesn't matter if you're a contending team, knowing that, you don't need him if you're a true contender. So right now, he's only valuable for those middle of the road teams. That means he's a sell. He's a player that I don't want in really any of my team situations. Now, going back to what we were talking about previously, players that you're trying to target with him. You're trying to use him in another piece to try to get to some long-term core stable wide receiver. Of course, you're not going and trading for Justin Jefferson. Of course, you're not going and trading for someone like DK Metcalf. You're not getting there. You're not even getting close. But it's very possible at the moment to go through and try to trade away Tyson Williams plus another small piece and get to Brandon Ayuk. And that's a round one wide receiver from 2020. That's going to be a core piece of your team for the long haul. Go trade Tyson Williams and a small piece, get to Rashad Bateman. It would be a no-brainer in that if you're a contending team, maybe Bateman actually breaks out in the second half of the year and he makes a difference for you in that playoff run. Whereas if you're a rebuilding team, well, hell, we know Rashad Bateman's going to have a considerable amount of value in 2022. Go trade him for Elijah Moore. There are so many players we can go through and talk about. Now, of course, you could try to trade him for a pick straight up. And if you're going to trade him for a pick straight up, I think you would probably look for a 2022 second and third. But I think, honestly, the better call is going to be to try to trade him in another piece for one of those younger wide receivers that may not be producing at a very high level right now. I think that's going to be the call that you look back on this offseason and you love yourself for it, especially if you're a contending team. Because if you're a contending team and you go trade for someone like DJ Chark, all of a sudden, it is in the range of outcomes for Chark to make a difference when you're in that playoff stretch. So you can still get similar production now and a lot more long-term value. Now, going over to our next running back, going to be literally the exact same mold here, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. Elijah Mitchell. Now, if you're a true contender, you don't need Elijah Mitchell to make that championship run. If you are a rebuilder, I know Elijah Mitchell was someone that was a rookie in this 2021 class. And of course, a lot of people in Dynasty Fantasy Football, they were talking about Elijah Mitchell. This was a very popular 5th, 6th round selection. Now, I will say that it's nice to have him on a depth chart where we know that there are not that many running backs that he's going to be competing with. And I will say, even after week 1, I came out and I said 100% it's a no-brainer that you want Trey Sermon over Elijah Mitchell, despite what Kyle Shanahan said about Elijah Mitchell winning this job. Well, you kind of have to walk that stance back whenever we see that Trey Sermon is playing behind JaMychal Hasty when they are both active and healthy in week 2. So maybe that makes us a little more worried about Trey Sermon. But here with Elijah Mitchell, he's just a running back that is never going to profile to be a lead running back going into the season. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Elijah Mitchell comes out and he sees 15 touches a week from here on out in 2021. But we know San Francisco is going to be willing to make an investment into the position. And going back to what we were saying in terms of these players not necessarily making sense with long-term value, the perfect example of this, and I know it's a little bit of a different example, but let's go to a running back that was an undrafted free agent last year. So very similar to the team investment put into Elijah Mitchell, where Elijah Mitchell was drafted in the 6th round of this past year's draft class. 6th round, undrafted free agent, very similar at the running back position. But let's look at James Robinson. Here with James Robinson, This was someone that came out and had an incredible rookie season. I mean, he looked fantastic as a rookie. I will go out on a limb and say there's no way in hell that Elijah Mitchell looks half as good as James Robinson did in his own rookie season. And you're looking at it and you're going, well, because the team doesn't have an investment into him, making them that core piece of the build going forward. I know that it kind of worked out for people who still invested into James Robinson because Travis Etienne got hurt. But at the end of the day, I think we can all safely say, especially when you're looking at Carlos Hyde getting usage in this offense, that Travis Etienne, he was going to be someone that was seeing a considerable amount of usage in a considerable amount of run in Jacksonville. I think Carlos Hyde was going to be a very similar piece, and that James Robinson, his value, while he was about literally the best case, I'll say James Robinson was the best case scenario that you would ever have from one of these running backs coming from nowhere. He still doesn't have that long-term value. Yes, it kind of worked out because of the injuries around him, but let's not look at just the overall results in raw fantasy points. Let's look at what happened on a step-by-step basis. And even when you add that peak in value, that came crashing down really early on. So I know Elijah Mitchell is a rookie. I know that some people want to make the argument that he does have that long-term value. I can't get behind it. He's a complementary running back. That's his build. And yes, he can be an effective complementary running back from an NFL standpoint, but I don't necessarily think he's ever going to be profiling to be someone that makes a difference in fantasy football. Now, I know that we probably just went through and gave you all some of the very easy calls. Let's go out on a limb a little bit more. Let's talk about some of these other players. And let's talk about Chris Carson here. So if we're pulling this up with the Chris Carson contract, I know that Chris Carson has looked pretty impressive. I mean, the majority of his production has actually come from the fact that he is just scoring touchdowns at a high rate so far through the first 2 weeks. We know that's not necessarily something that you're wanting to be betting on. You pull up this Chris Carson contract. Really, he only has that guaranteed money through the next 2 seasons. This is someone that after this year, Chris Carson is going to be a 28-year-old running back going into 2022. He'll have 1 year at best on that Seattle Seahawks contract again. And you have to understand that even if you really like Chris Carson here, let's just take a step back from a macro standpoint and let's view the profile of the running back. Let's view the profile of a 27-year-old running back that's not Derrick Henry, that's not giving you elite level production. Chris Carson is more so going to be your running back 3 on a contending team. And that's my problem with it, is that these contenders, if you really are relying on Chris Carson that heavily, we have to look ourselves in the mirror and we have to go, am I truly a contending team? Am I truly a team that's a juggernaut that's destined to take it down this year? And if I am, is Chris Carson a main part of that? Because we know, despite whatever Chris Carson does, it doesn't matter if Chris Carson comes out and he scores 14 touchdowns over the next 14 games. I'll say that's probably not going to happen, but even if it does, knowing that he'll be a 28-year-old running back that's dealt with injury concerns going into this next offseason, his value is going to take a significant hit. His value is going to be about half of what it is now. Like, I can guarantee you, it literally does not matter if Chris Carson comes out and say he rushed for 1,500 rushing yards this year and he had 20 rushing touchdowns. You are not getting a first and second round pick in a Superflex league for him in the offseason. That's just not how it's working. Whereas right now, you could cash out at that price for Chris Carson. You could go sell for a first and second round rookie pick. You could go sell, get Rashad Bateman plus another piece in return. And I think those are the moves that we have to be thinking about at this moment, because these guys, they're not going to see the same value just an offseason from now. I mean, a perfect example of this as well is going back to someone that we were just talking about, James Robinson. So James Robinson this past week was actually pretty impressive with the usage that he had. I mean, he does look like he's taking this job away from Carlos Hyde. But at the end of the day, Travis Etienne, nobody's going to be worried about his health going into 2022. It's not a Cam Akers type situation with the Cam Akers injury. Travis Etienne should be 100% healthy going into 2022. And of course, we'll come out with that buy low video next week, and there we'll be talking about Travis Etienne. You know it. But I think that for the moment, James Robinson, or at least the owners of James Robinson, they're maybe forgetting a little bit about the Travis Etienne situation, Travis Etienne on the horizon, and for good reason. I mean, obviously, you have the injury to Travis Etienne. At the same time, you have it where he's not necessarily getting usage in the preseason whatsoever, but, I mean, he was a rookie. He was a rookie running back selected in the first round. We know that is going to come. So I think that we kind of just cash out right now of James Robinson, knowing that he has no chance to be a top 20 running back next year. I mean, he's not a top 20 running back right now without Travis Etienne in this situation. So James Robinson, another player I'm looking to sell. And now our fifth running back that I want to talk about selling here is actually going to be Myles Gaskin. Myles Gaskin is not someone that I liked coming into the season. And I know that he's a little younger, but pulling up this contract and just pulling up the team investment that we have. I mean, here you actually have guaranteed money after this season. Guaranteed money, you have $21,000. I mean, I know $21,000, that's a decent chunk of change, but not for an NFL running back. Myles Gaskin, not going to get cut going into next year, but you just see the fact that this Miami Dolphins team has been stockpiling resources for this upcoming offseason. They could easily make a play to bring in a running back from here. Myles Gaskin, going right back to what we were saying about the other running backs on this list. They're the perfect examples. You're not valuing these guys in Dynasty because they're not difference making enough to make you a contender, and at the same time, they don't have the long-term value. Myles Gaskin fits that mold. Yes, he's younger, but he has no team investment. He was either an undrafted free agent or a day 3 draft pick in that 2019 class. I just want to be avoiding that situation. And our last player, another player that I just wasn't high on at all. We're going to throw him in here just because he fits this mold. Mike Davis. I mean, y'all can easily see the trend here. I don't even think we really have to talk about it that much longer, but Mike Davis is going to be 29 this offseason with $750,000 in the dead cap. I would not be surprised if Mike Davis was cut this upcoming offseason. That wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. So this will be your last chance to get any value from Mike Davis. And at the same time, if you think that you need to rely on him for a contending team, you probably need to ask yourselves, am I actually a contender or am I just pretending? Now, thank you again for watching this video. Thank you again for being subscribed to the channel and supporting the show. Of course, please go to the comment section. Let me know what you want to see from a Dynasty videos perspective going forward. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all, and have a great day.